Hello and welcome to this presentation. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Dave Sisk. I'm a data and database professional with over 20 years of experience in a variety of industries. Currently remotely earning a master's degree in data science from the Department of Mathematics at Eastern University in St. David's, Pennsylvania. The presentation today is around ethics in data science. We are going to focus in on the subtopic of privacy invasion by social media and its harm. So let's get started. Presentation, I want to bring into focus the disregard of ethical principles by social media and how that is creating harm for human beings through the use and misuse of our personal and behavioral data. And I'm attempting to provide credible evidence such as SEC filings, consumer loss numbers from Federal Trade Commission, and a few expert opinions along the way. So I hope you see this as convincing proof. In the beginning, there were principles. We borrow from the field of biotechnology, which is technology driven, changes quickly, and has a big impact on human beings. So the principles we often find in bioethics are autonomy, which is the ability to live as a sovereign human being, making your own choices, free from coercion, delusion, misleading, constant monitoring, those sort of things. Beneficence is one, essentially the intention to create a good outcome. Non-maleficent, the exact opposite end of the spectrum, which essentially boils down to try to do no harm. And justice, which is a focus on, in everything we do, let's ensure that we do it with a sense of fairness and equity. Those are the principles, those are the high-level principles. They are applicable to other fields that are similar to biotechnology, other fields like data science that are technology-driven, change quickly, and impact the lives of human beings. So it's a common and reasonable way to go about it. So now, principles are easy to invent and get human beings to agree to. They're not always easy to actually apply and practice. So how do we go about that? We take situations where there might be conflict between principles, the tensions, for instance, beneficence, a choice, decision that creates a positive impact for one group or demographic, yet creates a negative impact for a different group or different demographic. Is that acceptable? Is it not? That is a very clear example of beneficence conflicting with non-maleficence. So what do we do in that case? We dig into that tension, to that conflict. We negotiate, we reason to an acceptable outcome that will apply across the board, that is reasonable to apply across the board. And then as we see those types of situations, again, we make the decision in the same way, right? Now, what happens when we come across a case that we haven't seen before? We go back through the whole process and repeat it so that we can create a new reusable working principle to apply to that. So that's how we go about applying these. Now, where does privacy enter the picture? It's necessary for all of these principles. It's very difficult to live autonomously if you are under constant surveillance. That violates the whole concept of, eventually coercion, unnecessary monitoring. Beneficence, the positive benefit we've been told we get from surrendering our private data to various businesses is that we get better ads. You know, okay, that's wonderful. What else do we get? You know, that's actually good for us. Non-maleficence. Do this with no harm. It doesn't appear that that's the case when you look at all of the data breaches and scandals that we've seen in the news over, you know, the past couple of years or even the past decade. And justice, dealing in fairness. You know, one of the things that we are told by these consumers and collectors of our private data is that we keep your data private. But again, if you point back to the news items, the data breaches, and you know, scandalous events, yeah, you have to question: is that actually happening? Let's look at the three biggest sources of this privacy invasion of our individual data about us as individuals. Facebook, Google, Amazon. We all know those names. We all know that they are huge juggernauts of businesses. Yet there are more. There's, you know, everything from Walmart's website to, yeah, our cell phone providers that track our location. You know, there's plenty to consider here, but these are the biggest three and some of the ones that are most in view, easily in view. What is it? What exactly kind of data are we giving Facebook? If you have an account, or even if you don't have an account, you probably already know a lot of this. You know, all of our personal details, where we're from, name, age, cell and email, you know, who we know and how we interact with them, our connections, our social network, you know, where we live, where we've been, where we travel to, you know, our likes, dislikes, categories of interest. It's a huge, huge gob of information, right? How does Facebook use this data? If we go read their data privacy policies, in a nutshell, it's however they want to. You know, for targeted advertising is explicitly called out multiple times in the multiple pages of the policy documentation. The only stated limitation is our data will not be sold. But we really have to back up and question the definition of sold in this case, because we know from the data policy documentation that Facebook shares our personal data with various business partners like Amazon and Google, and plenty of others, and with large businesses that are developers and even individuals that are developers. So our data is being shared for its commercial value. How is that any different from being sold? In the big picture, it's really not. So, yeah, and look at the two, you know, the reality is that Amazon and Google, you know, the next two largest are really, they're not any better. You know, track every click, purchase, every search, track our location. You know, in particular, Amazon has gotten quite a bit of negative publicity because of eavesdropping with the Alexa device. You know, think about times where you may have had a conversation in your private household with a family member, and then maybe you went to Facebook and wow, there's an ad for exactly what you talked about. If I recall, illegal wiretapping was outlawed in the 1960s in the US, but you know, Alexa seems to be doing something very similar to that. You know, email scanning by Google is another one that's been controversial for years. 2017, Google made a commitment to only scan our email for virus purposes and not for targeted ads. Scroll forward to 2018, 2019, there continued to be scandalous reports, you know, around Google using our email contents for ad targeting. Let's hit the pause button for a second. So that these businesses claim that they are using anonymized data in these processes. And we have to really step back and look at what that part actually means. You know, if you know my zip code, you can narrow me down to 1 in 30,000 people on average. If you also know my birthday, you can now narrow me down to 1 in 80. And if you also know my gender and my age, now in most cases, you can narrow me down to an individual, one-on-one. So joining data from 3 anonymized data sets gets you to me as an individual. Think about what the implication of that is. This anonymized data does not appear to be nearly as anonymous as we think it is, or as we would like for it to be. You know, the typical response to this, and I've actually done it myself, is, okay, what's the harm? What is the real harm? You know, I have nothing to hide. You know, we can declare that, but are we sure about that as human beings? You know, there are all sorts of personal details that we might not want made public. For instance, if you've ever gotten a job offer through your Gmail account, guess what? Google probably knows what your current salary is. What medical conditions and medications might have you searched for or discussed over email. You know, messaging applications, personal conversations with or about others. You know, do you want that? Do you want the contents of that plastered all over the internet? You know, purchases of a very private nature. Do you want that information known, you know, even semi-publicly? You know, we can declare that I have nothing to hide, but the reality is there are things that would be very sensitive exposures that could cause emotional harm. The problem here is that emotional harm is very difficult to measure. So let's hit the pause button again. What do these companies actually do with our data? The answer is very simple. They make money with it, lots of it, and from advertising. Facebook, Google, Amazon, these are all revenues in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Profits in the 30 to 40 billion dollar range. That is big money. So it seems a reasonable question to say, okay, if these businesses measure things by the dollar, then can we as individuals, can we measure the harm of our personal data being exposed? Can we measure that in dollars? And the answer is actually yes, we can. Business Week Daily reported, a year or two ago that if you are a social media user, you are 30% more likely to be a victim of identity theft. They went on to say that if you're a user of Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat, and we now know that Facebook owns Snapchat, so that's really one instead of two, you are 46% more likely to be a victim of identity theft. Let's think about that for a second. If we look to the Federal Trade Commission, their Data Sentinel reports, for 2021, they found that the median loss for identity theft for an individual, a consumer, the median loss is $1,000 per person. And there were 1.4 million consumer victims of identity theft. So if we do some simple math with that, we come up with a number of $1.4 billion of losses that we as individuals have had to accept the burden of. That's a lot of harm. That is a lot of very measurable harm. Let's pause again. Let's hit the pause button again. And compare the numbers that we've talked about on one slide. So if you look at Facebook, Google, and Amazon combined, their revenue for 2021 is close to $1 trillion. To put this in perspective, the federal government's tax revenue from the entire country is $4 trillion. And these three businesses are almost to the $1 trillion mark. They are almost a quarter of our tax revenue of the federal government. Let's look at profits. 100 billion combined profits. Let's hypothetically say that your salary is 100K. How many orders of magnitude difference is that? So we've got 100K. So a million, 10 million, 100 million, then a billion, 10 billion, 100 billion. That is 6 orders of magnitude greater than your hypothetical 100K per year salary. That is 1 million times your 100K per year salary. So that's what they get. Now, what do we get? We get some likes. We get better ads. Thank you, Facebook, Google, and Amazon. Thank you so much. And we get $1.4 billion of losses due to identity theft. And that is just the identity theft part of it. I'm focusing on identity theft here because it's very easy to relate identity theft with privacy data. So, or data on our personal data and privacy. The total number for internet fraud, consumer internet fraud, is actually close to 6 billion. But we can directly tie 1.4 billion in that back to social media privacy practices. So it begs the question, what happened to those 4 principles that these businesses are supposed to be applying? One of my hopes here is that this slide makes you angry. Ethical issues at stake with privacy invasion are this. At a minimum, social media has an obligation to do no harm. And if you look at the numbers from the FTC, even not for just 2021, but prior years, it becomes very clear that they are failing miserably at even that basic principle. Forget the other 3. We haven't even successfully hit that first one of do no harm. Meanwhile, leaving us with billions, over $1 billion in losses, they are earning hundreds of billions in profits. Your identity theft is your problem. But hey, here's some likes to keep you engaged so we can continue to make money off of you. The question has been posed in the past of should we be paying, for instance, Facebook for our social media accounts, right? Is it that valuable to us? I look at that question, I go, why on earth would we do that? We're already giving them all of our private data, and they are making $40 billion off of it, a profit off of it. Maybe, perhaps, social media should be paying us for the use of our data, or at the very least, taking some financial responsibility for those 1.4 billion losses for consumer identity theft. Food for thought. There is a project around this concern called the Data Dividend Project. Feel free to visit that website, register if it resonates with you. Closing thoughts. I want this to be a call to action. This presentation to be a call to action. If we look at this trend, it's very disturbing. The consumer loss to internet fraud almost doubles each year. 2021, it was 6 billion. Next, what will be in 2022? 12 billion. 2023, or should we expect 24 billion? The top category has always been, or for at least the past few years, has always been identity theft. So we've got a disturbing trend. The top category being identity theft, and social media is an enabling contributor to this. So at what point do we take action? I hope to have inspired the first action, first step, which is realization that there is actually a problem with our privacy and what happens with our personal data, and an acknowledgement that, we may not know what we need to do yet, but we definitely need to do something. So I'm going to scroll you forward to a slide with my sources, the 15 sources. I feel like these are very, very credible sources. And I wanted to thank you for your time and attention today. Have a wonderful day.